Prison Architect is a fun, top-down prison building simulator for Introversion Studios. The idea is to play through the story or a free-form sandbox mode where you construct and run a prison, dealing with all the humdrum and occasionally extreme aspects of prison life. The story mode is a nice way to introduce you to the game and its mechanics with a fairly simple learning curve. You get given control of an established prison and tasked to complete various missions related to the stories of the prisoners themselves. Everything from building an execution chamber, to mob bosses being assassinated in your canteen, to simply feeding and entertaining all the bored, captive souls under your command. So how does the game present? First impressions are, it's very low-key graphically, nothing to test your GPU to the maximum here, simple sprite-based effects and characters slide around the screen, animating themselves when they perform an action like carrying something or stabbing someone. Whilst at first it feels a little unimpressive, the graphics allow for the mechanics of the game to shine through, letting you see the little moving people as icons and statuses with their own problems and activities before anything else. I also enjoyed the fact that the graphics made your imagination work a little harder, and actually worked to the benefit of the title in getting you more involved. You quickly learn the visual differences between prisoners, grey slacks, orange and darker ones telling you who's low risk all the way to high, and your little army of prison workers, construction guys and high-vis run around building add-ons to the prison, ferrying away rubbish as well as felling trees and other little tasks. Whilst the boys in blue, the guards, trunch and handcuff and escort their way around. There's also more detailed graphics and hand-drawn art for cutscenes and Polaroids, which tell prisoner stories in the campaign mode. It's richer and looks like a 90s comic style, which is a nice diversion from the otherwise simple, icon-esque graphics of the game. So from how it looks to how it sounds, well, there's a very little in the way of in-game music, which is odd as I bought the version with the soundtrack. Certainly no Mozart score, and it's so low-key that I don't actually think I heard much in-game music, which is actually a relief, as a repetitive ambient tune has a way of getting stuck. The audio is good though, with worker sounds, construction, general prison hubbubs, alarms, slamming jail doors and the like, all adding to the atmosphere. It feels like a cartoon version of Orange is the New Black, and I quite like the reduced, stripped-down version of the audio. It fits with the art style. Oddly, the only music that really is obvious is in the moments where the game is telling you a story about the prisoners or moving the action on by doing a little set piece. Weirdly, even though these little sliding graphics and iconic characters should feel very fake and unreal, the tension music plus the use of the Polaroid artwork actually makes the little vignettes of story quite compelling. Occasionally they even raise serious moral questions like the death penalty and religion, but doing so without being preachy. Due to the sparing use of music, I found myself quite drawn into the little stories. It's like where they had a budget for music and art, they spent it well. So how does it play? Well, it's a bit of a mix. The interface is quite fiddly and difficult at first. It's not always clear where things are or how to perform certain tasks. The to-do list on the top left of the screen helps as if you hover over an instruction, it tells you what's needed to complete the task. There are some fiddly options, as for example, you build a space or a room, but then you have to tell the game what sort of area that is, a common room, kitchen or whatever. That lets the characters interact with it as intended. At first this feels annoying and unnecessary, but later on you realise it helps give more customization to your prison. Want half a room as a cafe and the other half as a common room? Build one room and then designate each half differently. The utilities view allows you to see the prison in power and water terms, removing all characters and simply showing how power and water flow around the prison and letting you connect and manage this. I find this view oddly calming, as it's just the hum of electricity or the flow of water in a ghostly landscape of order. An example of how things can be fiddly is that you need to use large pipes to transport water around the prison and smaller ones to plumb items like toilets and sinks into the mains. You need to lay pipes on top of as well as into the small items to connect them, smaller things that sometimes eluded me for a while. The game does provide tips, so for example if you build a room that's meant to be an office, then there's a little red triangle inside the area that lists everything you needed before it's actually an office, i.e. install a filing cabinet and a desk, and then it can be used. The story mode tutorial also helps here, but it isn't complete and there are crucial bits of info that seem to be missing. For example, the first time I built a sandbox prison, the whole thing wouldn't function until I walled it all off from the world because the guards wouldn't escort anyone between buildings without a perimeter wall. It took me ages to work that one out, as it was never mentioned or covered anywhere else until I searched online. And even the walls must be carefully built, as one cell break due to a rogue tree or a stuck worker means it isn't functioning. You also need to add vehicle gates to either end for pick-up and drop-off, again all found through trial and error. The two modes of play are quite different, the story mode taking you through scenarios with characters and solving set-piece problems. I played this for a while before trying the sandbox. Upside to the story are characters, purpose and a sense of mission and meaning, with downsides that it's not fully comprehensive in telling you how the basics work, and there are some odd bugs. I tried several times to complete several optional narrative objectives, but just couldn't get the game to do what I wanted, which was frustrating as a completionist. The sandbox is hilarious fun and lets you run any type of prison you like. Mine quickly devolved into a Venezuelan hellhole of overcrowding, riots and death. Eventually most of the guards were either dead or injured, and the prisoners killed one another with impunity, with even the riot squads I called in unable to maintain order. Here it's worth saying that there are loads of little systems that again are not fully explained early on, but are very useful mechanics, like policies. This is essentially a skill tree for money. When your prison has so much in the bank, you can buy branches of policy like security or health, allowing you to construct different buildings and recruit different staff. There are also lots of sliders, which took me a while to find and use, that make the game much easier or harder. For a long time I was getting all sorts of prisoners delivered every 24 hours, regardless of if I had beds or maximum security cells, etc. When I realised I could set the type of prisoners I'd take, minimum risk being lowest paid for but easiest to handle, all the way to maximum security violent psychopaths, all the way up to closing the prison to new arrivals, it made the game much more easy to control. This is a game with some real depth and lots of interacting factors which impact your prison and control over it. There are lots of options on how you want to run things: clean, efficient, security driven, or with lots of recreation and rehabilitation for prisoners, or, like me, a corrupt bloodbath that treated all the convicts like zoo animals who killed one another with impunity and slept in shit and blood while starving just so I could make $300 a day off each of them. When the sandbox lacks is a sense of strategic mission or pressure. At first, the relentless arrival of prisoners, like lemmings, is the pressure. then you control this and take it slower. But there doesn't seem to be any real way of losing. That is, your prison can collapse as mine did, but that just sinks you into a financial black hole, which you can't get out of, with scores of escapes and deaths, so a long, slow death spiral. If you're a completionist and somewhat OCD, I can imagine the fine-tuning and smooth running of a prison is a beautiful thing to behold, but I just never got that good. Bottom line, is it worth it? My rule is this: I'll pay £1 an hour. That is, if a game charges me £5 to play, I want at least 5 hours of solid fun. Prison Architect definitely delivers here. Several times I was laughing my arse off at the total mess my prison had become and the violent anarchy that reigned within. Other times I was quietly patting myself on the back for a job well done. There are bugs in the game, people getting stuck in objects occasionally, or unclear objectives that seem impossible to complete, or important mechanics that you accidentally discover rather than learn, but all in all it was engrossing and interesting, and I definitely got my 5 hours out of it. So if you can find it for $5, £5 or less, and this is your type of game, then it's well worth a purchase. There's lots of good ideas and fun to be had, and it feels just fine to reward Introversion Studios for this time around. Hopefully it means next time they improve on all that's good here. Until then, it's a hilarious bloodbath of shanks, riots, corrupt guards and prisoners desperate to make it out of the hell I've built, or an orderly, clinical, well-run machine. That is your call, Prison Architect.